Would Western civilization be better or saved now in 2019 had Germany won World War I 100 years ago? Their fault. God wills it. May not know what or when. Allows it, wills it. Flag behind me is the Prussian flag. We're going to be talking about that here in just a moment. Let's break this down really, really quick. Pre-World War I Germany under the Kaiser was the ideal for Germany. Otto von Bismarck, he eventually got fired or whatever, but the alliance system he set up is rigid, but it's effective. And their military, of course, they were the Israel of Europe regarding the military, the capabilities, the engineering, the innovation, the morale, the determination of soldiers, of their fighting, their nationalism, their strong Prussian heritage. I took a bunch of notes because I'm trying to make things more concise, so I'm going to be reading a little bit. Pre-World War Germany was very, very capable, arguably the best military on the in Europe, including England, pre-World War I. Germany, in this time period before World War I, they were rooted in a strong Prussian old school condition. And they encouraged officers in the field to be innovative and to be creative. They didn't give strict orders like other armies did, like how the French did. The German high command would say, we want this city taken, do it. And the individual command officers on the ground were like, okay, what's the best way to do it? Whereas in other countries, the high command would tell them what to do. Germany didn't do that in World War II especially. They allowed the field commanders to make decisions on the spot. So why being on the front lines like Rommel and Patton and MacArthur was so important. Pre-World War in Germany, they were rooted in a strong Prussian old school tradition dating back to the Kingdom of Prussia. In 1871, the Kingdom of Prussia united the Northern German Confederacy, and they had a war with France, the Franco-Prussian War, which I recommend Googling really quick. Look on the Wikipedia at the casualties. It's like 7,000 Germans and Prussians, or 14,000 German and Prussians, and there was like 80,000 French dead. It was a massive lopsided victory. Like the Israel of, ironically, the Israel of Europe at the time period. And so in 1871, the nation state of Germany was born under Otto von Bismarck and the Kaiser, whatever his name was at the time. And I'm talking about Prussia, not Russia, not to be confused with shitty Russia. And even before Prussia became the Kingdom of Prussia, that entire region, the Denmark region, they were used to fighting Nord Vikings, being conquered by them, being trained by them, then being used as auxiliaries by them. The Baltic states, northern Poland, northern Germany, Denmark, Holland, northern France, Normandy, England had been conquered by the Vikings, and they passed on the strong military tradition, especially to whoever they conquered and who was residing in the 1500s or so, a little bit before and a little bit after, in northern Germany, Scandinavia, northern Poland, which became Eastern Prussia. In World War I, it took the entire French and British militaries, 2 million American troops, the pre-revolution Russian army, but the pre-revolution Russian army was knocked out early by the Germans, and that was also when gas was used for the first time, I think by the Germans against the Russians, but I'm not sure. The Russians got knocked out, but a lot of that was the Bolshevik Revolution. So, but prior to the revolution, Germany had already knocked Russia out. Italy began on Germany's side because it was Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, Bulgaria, and Italy. Those were considered the Central Powers. When it became clear that Germany was going to lose, Italy switched sides to the Allied Powers, which included the French, the British, the American. I think that's it. Let's see. Again, would Western civilization be better now? You have the migrant situation, you have all this stuff going on in Europe. In World War II now, 1939 to 1945, World War II, Germany, it took the entire military machines and mass armies of the United States, England, Canada, several smaller allied contingents like the Polish, props to Poland, thank you, even now, Russia got mauled up in World War II. They had 9 million military dead and 11 million civilian dead alone. It took all that to bring down the Third Reich, and even then the Germans beat the shit out of them as they retreated, because the Germans were known for and infamous for their rearguard actions in World War II. As the Third Reich started out here, it expanded out, German Empire, the Third Reich, and as the Russians on the western flank, and then the British and the Americans, the Allies the Soviets on the eastern flank, the Americans and the British on the western flank, slowly brought Germany back into Berlin in the fall of Berlin. 250,000 Russians died in that battle alone. But as it shrunk in, the Germans would leave, say, 5,000, 10,000 men behind, for instance, and that was to hold up the advancing Russians usually, but also us, the Americans and the English, the Canadian troops. They would leave these smaller rearguard contingents, and they would hold up like 10,000 Germans will hold up like a 250,000 Russian army for like 7 days. Like, they were very, very good. The Germans were highly militaristic, which unfortunately, because of the evil Nazi stuff, Holocaust, killing Jews, homosexuals, the disabled, Slavs, Gypsies, all of that. Very, very evil. It destroyed their military mindset, and it destroyed them culturally. The Cold War did not help them. German military innovations, just really quick, include the ballistic missile, just the Vengeance rockets, the super weapons that Hitler thought would win the war, which had they been introduced earlier in World War II, it would have had a huge difference, but they came too few, too late, as they say. The ballistic missile wasn't for the Germans. The Germans created a ballistic missile, which turned into the intercontinental ballistic missile in the arms race during the Cold War. And that same missile technology and rocket boost technology was used to get us into space, to get us into the moon. Right after World War II, when the Third Reich fell, the Soviets and the Americans rushed in and grabbed as many German scientists as they could, whether or not they were deep-seated Nazis, nominally Nazis with the Nazi Party, even Jewish scientists working for the Nazis. They grabbed up all these guys, and that's why Russia, it was Sputnik, the first orbiting thing in space, and then us first landing on the moon. All that was based on military stuff that the Germans were doing in World War II. The Germans even were experimenting with a jet propulsion combat aircraft that was shaped like a saucer. In the 1950s, if you think about it, if our scientists, together with their scientists, were testing stuff like that, that could explain a lot regarding UFOs. That's a whole different story, though. The German military innovations during World War II, the ballistic missile, first full auto assault rifle, not the AK-47. I think it was a German Sturmgewehr, I believe it was called, the Storm rifle. Stormtroopers from World War I, by the way. Star Wars does not have a trademark. Stormtroopers were German shock troops. That's what stormtroopers really were. So in World War II, they maintained that. Their first fully auto assault rifles called the Sturmgewehr. They first implemented jet warfare. We had planes, England and the United States, that were prop planes. They were propeller planes, rather, And so did the Germans until like 1944, and then all of a sudden our American and English pilots who were flying daily bombing runs looked out and they saw these jets going 2-3 times as fast as them and maneuvering like crazy, and it freaked them out. So jet propulsion, kind of a big deal. A lot of people don't know this. They take it for granted. The Germans during World War II, they integrated the different branches of the military. Air Force, the ground troops, the Navy, they integrated it so the chain of command was more together. The Germans first used paratroopers, and they first used gliders. Holland, it was feared by the German high command right before World War II, the Blitz in Western Europe in May 1940. The German generals feared that Holland was going to open up its dikes and break the dams and flood so that the Germans can advance. So the Germans sent German commandos, stormtroopers, using gliders, literal gliders, like hang gliders, and they landed. They were dropped off and they glided and landed on top of the roof of this massive fortress that Holland had. It was considered the best in the world at the time. The Germans raided it, and in one night they took it. You should research, Google it. It's really quite interesting. These glider guys landed on the roof of this fortress and they took it. So they first used paratroopers. They first used gliders. Blitzkrieg, how we make war today. If you just look at the examples of 1990, 1991, when Schwarzkopf did his left flank and way out into the western Iraq, and then Blitzkrieg into the left flank of Iraq's Republican Guard. Go forward 2003 in the invasion, we blitzed right up into Baghdad, bypassing static defensive positions. The Germans rewrote the textbook on modern warfare, but then again, so did the Germans. The Germans rewrote the textbook on warfare, and then we rewrote it, Americans, by adding to it with technological advancements. We were talking about liberalism versus I was trying to talk about liberalism versus authoritarianism. Probably not saying that right. I'm a little bit relaxed. I'm a little bit relaxed, so bear with me. Liberalism versus authoritarianism. Probably not pronouncing that right. Things better off now. Germany won World War I. Would things be better off now? The liberal heartlands from the 1500s onward would be France and England. And that's because they were more cultivated. The Romans had conquered them and settled them and built roads and cities. So it made sense that these kind of ideas, just in general thinking, Latin ideas, Greek ideas, classical Greek concepts like democracy. That's why the liberal heartlands are in the medieval times are like France and England. The authoritative heartlands are like Germany, Austro-Hungarian Empire, Russia, before the fall of the Tsars. The Austro-Hungarian Empire had internal fracturing. Kind of like Yugoslavia broke apart. Yugoslavia, Austro-Hungarian Empire. Germany stayed cohesive. The First Reich was from 1871 with the creation of modern nation state of Germany, led by Prussia, behind me, flag. The First Reich was I wrote it down. First Reich, pre-Reich, Kingdom of Prussia. First Reich, 1871 to 1918. This was the ideal situation. Otto von Bismarck leading the Germanic Confederacy, speaking of which, this Northern Germanic Confederacy occupied Paris for like 3 months, just to add to the humiliation. Google Franco-Prussian War, look at the casualty figures, you'll be astonished. The First Reich was 1871 with the creation of Germany to 1918 when Germany lost World War I. The Second Reich was the Weimar Republic from 1918 to 1933. The Germans eastward had never really known democracy. The West they did. Again, the more conservative, they knew the Kaiser. Kaiser translates into Caesar, translates into Emperor. The Kaiser, the Tsar, same, Caesar, Tsar. So the Second Reich, the Weimar Republic, again, was kind of like nation building. The United States and Iraq, they were literally trying to force democracy onto Germany, and it didn't really work out that well. It didn't last that well. And you could draw interesting parallels between that and what the United States has been doing, or they've been trying to do in Iraq. Again, today is February 1st, 2019, just to make clear. So yeah, the Weimar Republic, where the French and the English, the Treaty of Versailles, forced a democracy on Germany, which led to the rise of Hitler, the Nazi Party, and the Third Reich. Hitler took official control from 1933 to 1945 as the Third Reich, with Hitler at the top. The period in between during the Cold War, 1945 to 1990, when the Soviet Union collapsed, I considered that the, quote, no Reich period. So 1945 to 1990, it was like no Reich. That was when we destroyed Germany with Nazi guilt, Western Americanism, and then insane Soviet communism. The Fourth Reich is 1990 to present, 2019. 1990, the Soviet Union officially collapsed. From then until now. Okay. Liberalism versus authoritarianism. Despotism versus liberalism. Where would we be now in 2019 had World War I, had Germany settled instead of the Treaty of Versailles? Had Germany been victorious in a state, or at least in a state, ideally, where a peace treaty would have been signed that would have benefited Germany, given them more territory, given them more power. Nowadays, you would see a more united traditional conservative European continent instead of what I'm about to talk to you about. It's February 1st, 2019. Things in Europe are absurd. The continent and England. I'm going to list some of them. Can't get all of them in because I'm relaxed. Mass migrants, they're changing humanity, the continent of Europe. One magazine journalist said that in 20 years or in 1 or 2 generations, Europe as we know it will be called Eurabia. Tongue-in-cheek, Eurabia. It is changing the continent of Europe for thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, however far you want to go back, has traditionally been white. Because of the clouds, skin pigmentation, you didn't need to have dark skin. That's going to change. The entire continent's going to, because the birth rates are higher for Arabs than for whites in Europe and in general, so they're going, in a few generations, they're going to have Germany, because Germany is a democracy, and these Arabs are going to be voting in Arab Muslim candidates. All right, so the mass migration into Europe, Merkel, Europe is being just, these right-wing nationalistic parties are coming to the fore in Europe, especially Italy, Germany. They just lost Bavaria. Merkel's going to resign. The Scandinavian region. Because of the migrant issue. So now you have mass migrants, you have liberal socialist problems that have gone wrong throughout Europe. They can't defend themselves because they rely on the United States. Mass continent-wide civil unrest, just look at the yellow vests. The spread of Arab and Islam, which is irreversible. I don't know what would be done about that, and more. Had Germany won World War I, World War II may not have happened, or it would have happened in a different, smaller scale way. No crazy atrocities. Maybe Stalin attacked a strong Germany, which under the scenario, no Treaty of Versailles, none of that. It would have been high command Prussian-led Germany. Had Stalin dared, he wanted Poland, he could have taken Poland, and Germany may have fought a defensive war, and they may have taken Poland, but they would have at least beat the Soviets. And that would have been that. It wouldn't have been a mass, total World War II was 50 to 60 million deaths. It's total Asia theater and European theater. Okay. The Kaiser, Caesar, it would have remained in power most likely after World War I, had they won. Likewise, the continent would have to have been, by necessity, they would have had to have leaned more toward the conservative traditions based on the authoritarian nature of Prussia. Flag behind me. Counterfactuals, Stalin, the defensive war that I just described. It'd be funny if the Israelis invaded and fought Third Reich, Weimar, traditional German military, even SS Waffen SS, and the SS fighting Israel. An Israeli invasion struck me as funny. Where would Western civilization be now had Germany won World War I? I think it'd be better off. It'd be Western civilization, meaning Europe, in England, spreading across the Atlantic into America. We're a little bit behind Europe, I think. So my friend says, at least the cheese. Shout out. I'm sorry I got fat. It'd be more conservative. We wouldn't have mass migrants. Germany would not have let in 1 million migrants. None of that crap would be happening. Hungary, the president of Hungary, for instance, he came out and he said, Hungary is going to remain a white Christian nation, whether you like it or not. Early on in the migrant crisis, and he threw troops up on the border, and Hungary's not having much of a migrant crisis, whereas in Germany and France, you're having not only mass rapes of native women, native Germans, native French, native English, these Arab Muslim rape squads that go around. That's blacked out by the media, by the way, if you want to look it up. There's a backlash for these far-right nationalist groups rising to the fore and being voted in, like in Italy. We'll see what happens. Also, it's not just Syrian migrants. A lot of military-age men, instead of staying and fighting like men for their homeland, they just left. Some sub-Saharan Africans see this as an opportunity. Them, along with the Arabs in North Africa, are going across to Italy. The new Italian government's not letting them in, for the most part. I've gone on long enough. Leave a comment. Do you think the Western civilization in 2019 would have been, meaning what, Europe, the state of affairs in Europe, and by default the United States, you think it'd be better off had Germany won World War One? Let me know. Oh, by the way, I have Prussian lineage, Ancestry.com DNA test. My family came from Prussia, so